First-time founders need to know how to pitch. But no one really teaches us how to engage in that Q&A session, that first 30 minutes when you've got access to an investor.
Meet Emma Rees, a four-time founder across B2C, B2B and Enterprise SaaS, chairwoman at Deployed, an angel investor, and now a business coach and advisor.
If you were to take that one step further and then try and get investment on that, I would then be asking all of those people and stakeholders that I've built relationships with.
In today's episode, we dive into the intricacies of pitching, validating your ideas as a founder, asking the right questions as an investor, and overcoming the common barriers as a female founder.
I've just proved to you that I've gone out and validated my idea, and I've spent 3 to 4 months building exactly what I know my customers want. And I know how much their capacity to pay is, and I know how big this problem is and this pain is for them. And doing nothing for them is costing them millions.
Emma, at just 15 years old, you quit school and start walking with a CV to try to find a job. What made you took that decision back then?
I would love to tell you that it was really thought out and it was a very strategic decision, but it definitely was not. I don't think I was getting the stimulation that I wanted from school, to be honest. And I was pushing boundaries and getting into trouble a lot. And actually at the time, my parents were like, well, you can't leave unless you get a job. So I was like, okay, cool. That sounds like a good challenge. So, I printed off a little 1-page CV with next to nothing on it. My parents had run several businesses before, like they owned a delicatessen and they had a building company, and I had done part-time work for them. So I had those on my CV, and I just printed a bunch off and just went door to door and put on my biggest smile and said, are you looking for anyone to hire? And I'm looking for a job.
That's interesting. Because it's unusual, right? I hear a lot of people quitting school and so on, but often it's in college or university. But at such a young age to literally let's see if I can find a job. And once that happens, what job did you find and what that job lead you to?
So the first person that would take me in for a trial was a hairdressing salon. So they were like, sure, you can start. I think maybe it was a Wednesday or a Thursday. And I remember by the Saturday, they said, hey, if you turn up and as long as you're wearing closed-in shoes, you can start sweeping the floor and making coffee. So I turned up and started working on Saturday. There was nothing strategic about it. It was just, I want to get out of what I'm doing, and this feels like my ticket out of it. And if I can tell my parents I've got a paid job, I get to do what I want to do. It gave me some flexibility. And I think the thing I loved about it most was the engagement with customers. So I think this job taught me some of the best customer service skills that I'd ever learned. The customer essentially paying your wages, and the customer is always right at that point. It taught me a lot, and it taught me how to read people really well. Does the lady want me to talk to her while I'm washing her hair, or does she just want to sit quietly and read her magazine? So reading body language and learning how to interact with people, I didn't realize it at the time, but that would come in handy in later years when I was trying to raise investment or network in a room and understand who was open to want to have a conversation and who wasn't.
Tell me more about body language, because I feel that it's such an underrated skill. How you can tell someone if they want to stay quiet, or they are a talker, or they are outgoing and easy to have a conversation with them? What they're looking for when you scan their faces or body?
I think firstly, some people are really easy to read. And I know I'm like this. I look back at some of my recordings where I'm coaching founders, and I can tell from the look on my face, I'm like, you did what, or this, or so I'm quite obvious. And I guess not everyone is kind of overtly obvious with what they're thinking and feeling. So some people you can read them quite easily by their facial expressions or, the rolled eye but I think the nuanced version around this, let's say all of a sudden we're in a room full of people that we want to network with. So as a founder, you're in a room full of investors and founders. I think there's a few key things. First of all, kind of looking around the room, are people looking more open? Are you looking at maybe 3 people together and they're quite sort of closed into each other? Does it look welcoming? Are people laughing in mid-conversation? Can be a lot harder to kind of, insert yourself into that conversation. And I think the way to then get into it is lead with curiosity. Like if you are genuinely interested in someone and you're asking questions, you can always kind of get someone talking. And if they keep giving you back kind of, one-word answers and, they look a little bit disinterested, and maybe it's time to say, hey, it was great to meet you. I'm going to head on and meet with other people in the networking event. So yeah, I think they can be nuanced, but I think if you're paying enough attention, you can feel whether someone is warm and inviting or someone feels a little bit closed, like they don't want to engage as much.
Absolutely. And I guess it's the intersection of their facial expression and as well the way they answer you and so on. Because often their face might say something, but they might be very warm and very welcoming and engaging in the conversation and so on. But maybe just based on different circumstances, like maybe even the cultural part, their face might be less welcoming, but their voice and their way of engaging might be, oh, this person is actually way warmer than I expected. And indeed, by their answer, you can tell a lot if they are welcoming you in that space. And speaking of that, you walked the rooms with the likes of Microsoft and ventures and so on. So you've been put in those type of situation, real world situation in which people try to pitch their ideas or they are wanting to network and so on. How you differentiate from those that really have something to offer or they really have an amazing idea behind their startup from those that are just testing the waters and they're like, oh, I just want to do this because I heard this cool.
The thing that jumps out to me, I think, so first of all, to start having those conversations, it's either networking or it's at events or it's at a dinner. So I think, firstly, putting yourself out there. And I guess some people do feel like they're coming with an objective, like they're there to either, pitch you for investments or, yeah, they have an objective. You can feel that as well with the questions, and they kind of beeline for, they've already got the hit list of who they want to speak to, and they'll make a beeline for them. And I think it's the deeper you get into a conversation and the more questions you ask. So in the example that you asked, like actually with a founder, if they're kind of just pitching a new idea or they're like genuinely there as an investor to be interested, I think, again, it comes back to the point I made earlier. I think leading with curiosity and listening more than you're speaking, there's so many things that you can learn from that. Like, are they a newer founder? Are they a first-time founder that's really trying to find their ways and they're just exploring things? Or, have you got a hardcore angel that you've managed to sort of have a conversation with and they're actively looking to deploy capital? And you're not going to find that out from their LinkedIn profile or their blog or their newsletter. You're going to have to lead with curiosity and ask questions. And I think the easiest way to understand what their objective is question after question, and asking good questions will give you the answers that you need. And I've always found that I think not just asking one question, but then diving a little bit deeper into that. So really listening as opposed to, and I used to do this as well. I think someone would say something and then I'd want to relate to them. So I would tell a story that related to the thing that they just said for us to have common ground to connect on. But really the way to connect deeper is to ask them another question.
And indeed, that's an entirely different skill. And can you share some of the questions that you ask founders that can reveal those insights that no one else can extract from them?
I really like to understand what drives a founder. So if I put myself in the position of an angel investor, and I really want to understand the conviction behind this founder. So I might ask them, what brought you to solve or want to solve this problem? Typically, I find founders build things they wished existed, or they experienced the problem and there wasn't a solution for it, and then they ended up building on the back of that. Or it's like impact driven, and they're really, that's their purpose. That's the fuel to their fire. So asking them how they came to this problem, then sort of asking them about, their career path that they had before this. Sometimes I find it quite telling when I'll ask a founder, like, being an entrepreneur is not the easiest road. It's not the highest salaries. It's definitely the more stressful path. So why would you leave your, particularly when I find founders have come from corporate, like why would you leave your paying job to do this? And that's kind of taking it one step deeper, because the opportunity cost that they're in front of there is huge, right? Someone has to be really motivated and passionate to give up a really nice high paying job that's got good holidays and got good security and, you know, a good pension and all those things for the future to like really jump into something that's, you know, the most risky asset class that we have. The number of startups that fail are extraordinary. And for someone to do that and understand their underlying passion and motivation helps me build conviction in the founder, because when the going gets tough, I want to know that that individual is still driven to get up and solve those problems.
Indeed. And when you manage to find that, because often they might have the best idea possible, but if they have a particular reason why they are doing it and they're being driven by that, it's much more easier to see that founder succeed rather than just, you know, few months or years later failing. And apart from that, what other traits or characteristics or maybe upbringing the founders must have in order to increase their chances of success?
I think this is a great question. And I have thought about this a lot. I've often been asked, like, what do I think the skills were that kind of led me, which would seem like insanity to go and build 4 startups. And I'm building another one at the moment as well. So like, what sort of insanity leads someone to want to do that? I think, you know, for me, both one of the skills that I think you can learn as well, it's like grit, determination and resilience. I think, you know, the resilience to just keep failing and seeing that as part of the journey and seeing that every failure can actually lead you into a path that you didn't expect, where you can find the answer, as opposed to trying to be perfect and deliver a perfect product all the time and not pushing out until it's perfect. And I think in the beginning, I struggled with that as well. Like I wanted everything to be perfect before I like put it in front of the customer, or, you know, that fear of judgment, or maybe no one's going to buy my product or like my product. But actually the founders that do that and do that quickly, I believe builds more successful businesses, because they're truly listening to the customer. They're building for the customer. And they're constantly iterating. So they're like, this isn't working. I've kind of failed at this, but what is that leading me to? And that in itself builds resilience. And it builds that grit in someone. You know, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get back up again. And I think that that's so important. And determination, I think, is a trait as well that actually, for me, when anyone ever said to me, you totally couldn't do that, or no way would you do that, that was like kerosene to my fire. I was like, I'll show you. I think as I've matured, I've lost that a little bit more, but definitely when I was younger, I was like, don't tell me I can't do it.
It's funny that I not only can resonate with this, but I know a lot of people that are being driven by that, and even huge names that we kind of see around nowadays, like Alex Hormozy, has this upbringing story with his father and so on, and like we are pushed by that indeed. And going back a bit to, because I'm super curious about your approach to understanding customers, because you mentioned that, and it seems so logic, and everyone knows that we need to listen to the feedback. We need to listen to what they're having to say, but often people don't know how to extract that information, and not only how to ask, but sometimes even how to find them if they are maybe in the testing phase or validation phase. And if you can break it down, let's take it as the validation phase where you're not really having yet customers. How you get those first customers to get the feedback, or how you find people that might be interested or might have the problem that you solve in order to get those insights from them.
Yeah, this is a great one. This comes up a lot as well when I'm working with founders. And I push this so much. I come across so many founders that are like straight out trying to hit the investment meetings. And it's like, there's a precursor to this. Let's take a few steps back and let's make sure that you're validating your problem first. Because that helps you de-risk. That helps the investor see that you're de-risking this as well. So I feel like it's this precursor step that lots of founders, and maybe you're right, maybe they don't do it because there's no clear framework or guideline for it. So I love this as a topic. Firstly, I just want to point out that I think it's really different for different types of businesses. Like if you are building a B2C business, I think it's a very different way to validate the product versus an enterprise SaaS solution. So we'll do both because I think maybe that's helpful as well. I think on B2C, I believe for me, because I've done both, I believe that for me personally, I found that easier to build conviction and validation quicker than it did with enterprise SaaS. But they both have their pros and cons. So if I was to set up a B2C business today, the first thing that I would probably do is use AI to spin up a website, make it really clear with what I'm doing, and maybe have a free download and a sign-up wait list. So push it out. I'd be pushing it out on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, wherever your customers are would be the place that I would push this. And I would try and get as many free signups to actually understand, are people interested in this? Like how many emails, people don't want to hand out their email all the time, right? But if you're giving them maybe the 10 things you should do before whatever problem you're solving, that could be a great way first. And then I would push it to my friends and ask them to push it out. If I was promoting it on Instagram, then maybe I would do some paid ads as well, like keep it really low, but I would definitely try and push it out. If it was a physical product that I was trying to sell, like a B2C product, I'd probably go back to old school and walk the streets, like try and stop people and say, hey, would you test my product? What do you think about this? Like, the only catch with that is I think sometimes people find it difficult to give bad feedback if they don't like it, particularly with a stranger. But I've seen people do some really creative stuff where they walk around with a microphone. They're like, hey, someone's testing these two products. Did you want to try this and tell me what you think about it? You don't have to tell them that you're the founder. Like, what do you think of these two different things? Because all of that is data and validation for you to come back to the drawing board and go, do I need more, or is this enough to kind of keep going? And particularly with like AI tools today, like you can pretty easily knock up a landing page, a clickable product. You can vibe code something that's kind of got it as a minimum viable product to get in the hands of people to get feedback. So I think there's lots of ways that you could do that to build conviction. B2B and enterprise SaaS, I think, is harder just because getting access to those customers can be more difficult, right? If you think about the stakeholders or the ideal customer profile, it might be an entire team of people within a large corporate. But how I would go about that is I would start talking about the pain on LinkedIn, and I would make sure that I position myself as an authority in the pain and the solution, but largely I would talk about the pain, and I would talk about how I've solved this with customers, even if it was in an analog way first, before building a tech product around it. I would potentially try and do some consulting work in this space so I can get people to be paying for me to advise them on how to solve this problem, even if it's in an analog way, and then take their problem and suggest solutions and start to take that validation in terms of what features am I going to build for the product. I would do that I would make a list of like 200 companies that were my target companies, and then I would start outreaching them on LinkedIn. And again, I wouldn't outreach and ask them to use my product. I would outreach them and tell them that maybe I've got a free report that could help them solve their problem, or I'll give them 30 minutes of consulting and tell them how they can solve this problem, or I can save them money, or I can increase their efficiency to try and get time from theirs to then take them through a customer interview. If you were to take that one step further and then try and get investment on that, I would then be asking all of those people and stakeholders that I've built relationships with I would show them my clickable product. Maybe it's not live yet, but it's a clickable product again, so they can kind of get in and see what it feels like. I would ask them if they wanted to be early adopters of this product. It could, again, depending on what its USP is. And would they give me a letter of intent that if I was to raise investment, would they be one of my first customers? Now, I know that some investors say, that's not really validation. But if I came back to an investor and said, in the last 3 months, I've spoken to, 150 of my ideal customer profile companies, of a list of 200 that I made, and I got access to those stakeholders, I have their user interviews, and I have letter of intent to demonstrate intent to buy my product, that is showing incredible conviction to an investor. I've just proved to you that I've gone out and validated my idea, and I've spent 3 to 4 months building exactly what I know my customers want. And I know how much their capacity to pay is, and I know how big this problem is and this pain is for them. And doing nothing for them is costing them millions. And I think that builds not only conviction in you as a founder, because when I start having those conversations with investors, all of a sudden my confidence is through the roof because I know this is a problem and I know that people want this solution. And I think that confidence then oozes confidence to the investors as well, that they're like, okay, you've done your homework, you've done your research, and you're getting that validation, which helps me de-risk my investment.
Absolutely, because if you're just pitching without having those insights and those conversations and so on, no one will truly believe you that you have a valid idea. Plus, asking for money, I think it's a smart way to say, oh, you actually believe in this? Let's see if you're actually going to invest. And even if it's a small investment, but having that initial money validation, it's also very powerful, in my opinion, at least. And even I would say for B2C products, if you're thinking about it, like, of course, depends on the product, but if you're building something and you ask them to put a deposit down before the product launch so they can actually see it, they're just believing in it, or they put their money where the mouth is, right? And going back to that a bit before we dive into the B2B more, when it comes to B2C, I found sometimes very hard to find where they're actually spending their time, because nowadays the behavior, it's scattered. Even if you think that, here's a Facebook group on that particular niche or another platform group that are spending time discussing on that, I found that sometimes, even if you're active there, the message doesn't reach the audience because platforms favorites, they prefer the paid advertising, or they're basically don't have reach, and it's not that easy to find that validation. Do you have any insights on what's the best way to find your tribe, basically?
Yeah, it can be challenging, and I totally relate to what you're saying as well. I think particularly where users are sitting, there's so many different platforms. Actually, it's really fragmented. I mean, I do find Reddit a great source sometimes when you want to find the micro groups of people, and I find that can be quite active on the everyone's quite active in responding. So I have found in the past that that's worked quite well, whether it's the caliber of individuals that you want, but I think actually pushing out, talking about the problem, or how has anyone solved this before, or this has been a real problem for me. Like maybe it's a story around how your origin story as a founder, like actually you experience this pain. Are there other people out there that you're actually solving this for? Do they want to come on as a user group? And depending on how intense that pain is for that person, like you will find them. And actually, if you're saying that you've got a solution to it, they will come to you. So I think, but I mean, it's been years since I've done B2C. I think, my last sort of almost 10 years, 7 years has been like enterprise SaaS. So I think maybe some of my knowledge is a little bit outdated now on B2C, or maybe it never changes.
Yeah, with Reddit, actually, yeah, indeed, it's still a valid place, because especially thanks to its quote unquote privacy when it comes to not showing your real name or whatever, people are more willing to answer questions or share their opinions, or even privately test some products and so on. And I think it's still like very, very well. And I see people a lot, especially when they push something to Product Hunt and so on for the B2C space, they are going to Reddit to ask for validation or see if people are interested and so on. So that still works well. But when it comes to B2B, how do you get in the right rooms? Because I feel like that might be the, I won't say secret sauce, but the right way. Maybe I'm wrong. Please tell me.
I mean, I find LinkedIn the best way to get access to corporate people, depending on whether your ICP is, someone in the marketing department, or is it someone in procurement or someone in finance. Actually being able to list, first of all, the companies that's your target company, and then who is your ICP within that company, and then tracking them down on LinkedIn. I find that my biggest hack. So even when I want to make maybe a slightly unrelated example. So for this summer, I've come out to Perth, West Australia, where I'm from. And I haven't lived here for about 20 years, but I wanted to meet people in the ecosystem. I wanted to meet founders and investors and angels. So I used ChatGPT and Gemini to draft me a list of the top 50 people in Perth, West Australia, that are in those categories of people. Varying responses. Some of the links weren't right, but actually it pretty much gave me a solid list of people. And then one by one, I went through and tracked them on LinkedIn. I created an Excel spreadsheet for myself, categorize them into which category they fell into. And then systematically, I just spend 20 minutes every day when I'd wake up and have my coffee, I'd get on LinkedIn and I would go back through their posts. And even if they hadn't posted for sort of 3 to 6 months, I'd find their last post. I'd go in, I'd read the post. I'd leave a really thoughtful comment. I would never use AI for commenting, but something really thoughtful, or ask them a question or celebrate their win. I would do that a couple of times. I'd pick off a few people. I'd set my timer so I don't spend any more time than that, or by the time I finish my coffee. The following day, I'd send them a connection request with no message in there, because I found that the conversion rate is higher on that. And then when they accept my connection request, I go back in and say, hey, thanks for connecting with me. This is who I am. I'm coming out. I'd really like to meet you. And that works incredibly well. And I think the reason it works incredibly well, and this also works for B2B, is I've taken the time to find out what they do. I've taken the time to read what they've written about, and they've been passionate. I've also been thoughtful in engaging with content that they've pushed out. And typically when I ask them for a meeting, it's like, I'd love to have a meeting and discuss this, or I would love to share some of my insights in something else. So I feel like I'm giving before I'm asking for something from people. And I found that ethos has got me to meet with people, both when I was running Deployed and now in this example that I share, is people then are more welcome and warm to go, actually, I really like what you're talking about. And I make sure that my LinkedIn profile is up to date and talking about what I'm doing or the problem I'm solving, because that's, showcasing who I am before they meet me. And I've had great success from that. But it does take discipline, and it does take a little bit of consistency every day. But you can get access to people that, I've managed to get access to like COOs and CFOs, who were our target audience last time, of multinational companies that I thought would never reply to my message. And sometimes they took a little bit longer to warm up. And that's the power, right? Because I'm like, if I really want to talk to you and I think that you're right, and I mean, I think it also means you need to spend a little bit of time curating the list. But now with AI, like literally me and AI for 5 minutes, and I had a list of 50 people. All I had to do every day was like a little bit of engagement every day for about 2 weeks. And it's such a superpower for founders. So that would be my top hack.
Yeah, and it's a good one, because LinkedIn is still underrated. Like, people are still thinking that it's that space where people are searching for jobs. And it might be true for some, but it's more than that. You can actually meet amazing individuals, and finding ways to get in touch with them, especially if you're in your situation, like you are in a big hub or you are in a big city where you can actually meet them in person. That face-to-face connection will always be the online interactions. But even if you don't have that chance, still online can work really well. But you mentioned something there, that we need to write it big on the wall, like give before you ask, because otherwise just pitching directly, asking for something, is not going to work. Probably you'll be ignored and never hear back from that individual. And apart from that, because I feel like there are a lot of lessons that you had by building so many startups and now working on a new one. What's something that often is not shared in this space that you learn?
I think maybe, so like the give example that you've just talked about, I remember when someone first told me that, and I think it was like a startup advisor that I'd had in the beginning. Where I was building my first company in London, I didn't have a network. I didn't grow up there. I didn't know anyone. So I felt like I was building from scratch. And a startup mentor had said to me, listen, you need to give value to people first before they will, want to be in your network and want to start introducing you to their network as well. And people can be really closed off. So, always be graceful, like always turn up on time, like always be curious, always give rather than take, make people feel important, lead with curiosity. Like, that famous saying, like people will always remember how you make them feel. That is so true. And they're the people that are memorable. But I think another hack on the back of that was, first, before I ran off, I'd said to my mentor, well, what can I give? How can I add value? Like, I'm busy building a product. I don't know what I'm doing. And they were like, you might be able to introduce them to someone in your network, or maybe you've done a recent report on something that could be valuable. Maybe while you've been building your problem, you've uncovered a data set on how many people experience this problem and a small case study and how in our case, we were saving customers millions, a small case study around that you would like to share some of the examples of this that you feel that they could probably take and do on their own, but actually it was giving something. And then just recently I was on the Included VC program, and Nikita, the founder, she was all about give, give, give. And again, some of the young VCs would be like, well, what can we give? We're so young in our career. What can we add that's valuable? And she would tell people to pick a topic that they were also interested in and go and research it. Go spend an afternoon or a Saturday afternoon or a couple of hours researching it, and then write a deep dive. 1,500, maybe 2,000 words, but 1,500 words. Pull in all the relevant information that you thought was really insightful and curate that. Now, anyone who's talking about that topic or anyone who's interested in that topic would probably love to read your deep dive, because you've now spent hours digesting information, you're mastering that information, and you're sharing it to someone in a curated version that they can spend 5 minutes reading, and they now know all the latest startups in that space. They know where the investment's going. Like, you've basically done what a research analyst would do and curated. Now, obviously, I know with AI, we can sort of, speed that up and do more deep research, but you're still adding a human element into it and a wrapper around it. Now, sharing that with someone to say, hey, I noticed you're talking about this topic all the time. I've just done this deep dive. I think you would find this interesting. And as a kicker, you could share them the deep dive while it's in draft and say, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I might want to quote you in this before I push this live. Not only now are you creating content for that individual, it's their topic. You've also become a bit of an expert in it because you just spent 4 hours learning about a topic that excites you. I mean, that feels like such a win-win and so generous. Who's going to say no to that?
Yeah, exactly. And especially because you involve them, right? People want to share their opinions. They want to be seen and heard and so on. And if you ask them to contribute to that piece of content, it's much more easier for them to say yes. As often if you just push it like, oh, here's the thing that I built and you might find it useful, but without asking them that additional thing, like, share your thoughts here because you're a valuable expert in the field or whatever, they'll be much more likely to say yes to that. That's a powerful one. Apart from that, you wanted to mention something.
Oh, yes. I think the other underrated thing is sometimes complimenting someone on something that resonated in something that they've written as a way to get access to a meeting. So if you don't have something that you can give, you haven't done the deep dive, maybe you're trying to meet with loads of investors. If they have newsletters or blogs or anything where they're sort of publishing content that they've written about, And I don't mean doing this insincerely, like finding something and going, hey, I love this one comment that you said when it doesn't really resonate with you. Actually take the time to read some of their stuff and then writing back to them and saying, hey, I was just reading your post on X, Y, and Z. This really resonated with me because, give your example, thank you for writing about that. Or it's unique because I haven't read about that anywhere else. You seem to be a leading voice in this, and I'm solving in this space exactly what you were saying before. Could we have a meeting? So I think actually sharing compliments where you feel they're valid is such a great way, because sometimes we don't stop to tell people, hey, that thing that you did, I really loved it, or it was really insightful, or it really resonated. And I think when there's so much content out there all the time and our attention span's so short, taking the time to do that to someone, they'll remember you for that.
And on that particular note, I'd like to compliment you for the work that you're doing to elevate women in tech. How women can overcome those barriers that are still there for them in order to become founders?
So I think firstly, like there are, the language that we use is really important. I remember the first time I was referred to as like an under-recognized founder or underrepresented founder. I was like, oh, okay, what does that actually mean? And I really like the term underestimated, because I think there's lots of different minority groups. It's not just women per se. But actually under-recognized means that we're just not recognized, as opposed to underrepresented, because I meet and speak to female founders all the time. I don't think there's a problem with representation. I think we're everywhere, but we're under-recognized because they're not getting the funding. So one of the first things that I like to talk about when incubators or accelerators or funds talk about, we support minority groups. Actually, let's talk about them as under-recognized or underestimated. I think it's a much nicer word to define us. So I don't think there's a barrier to underestimated groups getting into startups. I think the real problem is getting funding and capital into the hands of underestimated founders. And largely that problem is because VCs, angels as well, but more VCs, they pattern match. And because we're already not getting the funding, then we haven't built enough patterns for them to kind of invest in that, unless they're proactively putting money into, let's take female founders as the group that we're going to talk about here. Unless they're actively putting money into it or making sure that they are, educating themselves on the unconscious bias that they may be facing when they're making those investments, I think it's a really difficult problem that we all face at the moment. And I think the ways to get around it is either have funds that are focused on this, angel groups are focused on it. There's plenty in the UK and Europe that are actually angel syndicates focused on investing in companies that have 51% ownership or at least one female founder in the founding team. Initiatives to make sure that capital's flowing, government initiatives, maybe it's non-dilutive funding, grants. It's a problem. The number hasn't moved in a decade, and of the percentage that goes to funding to female founders. So 3% of funding goes out to all female founded teams. There's more to mixed teams, which is, better. We are seeing some progress there, but all female founded teams only get 3% of global funding, and it hasn't changed in about a decade. It's disappointing, but I think we are starting to see more impact and more change. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think we're getting more diversity of people who are writing checks. So whether that's angel founders, so there's more women that are now deploying capital, their own money. We are seeing more women in VC, so they're at the decision-making table. And I think there's a lot of noise around it. And certain countries like the UK, Innovate UK, did this initiative to invest in female founders. So I think we're seeing more initiatives to make sure that capital's getting into the right hands. But I don't think it's enough, because the change is not happening fast enough. And I think we're going to need a lot of people to help solve this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the more people are involved, and at the same time, the more people are aware of maybe, let's hope, some investors are listening to us now. Unfortunately, often it comes from inside, right? Like there are some maybe limiting beliefs there that they are facing, and they are reluctant to invest in more diverse startups. And can you tell them what they should look into? Because often they might miss on amazing opportunities if they don't invest. Do you believe there are certain limiting behaviors or limiting beliefs they have that are preventing them to trust more?
Yeah, I think it, it's a really difficult one because a lot of the bias is unconscious. So if you're not aware of your own biases that are coming up, you're just fundamentally not aware of it, which makes it difficult to change. First of all, I would say so if we had investors listening to this, first of all, I'd say, let's have a look at your portfolio. How much diversity is already in your portfolio? If there's not much, why is that the case? I have had investors come to me and want access to better deal flow of female founders because I'm coaching and working with a lot of them. So they're like, do you have access to early stage female founders, which is great. So many of them are proactively looking for diverse investments. But it's not really the deal flow problem. I think it is a deal flow problem from the case of where are they finding, are they going to the right networking groups? Are they putting themselves out there where female founders are hanging out? Are they joining female founders syndicates? Actually, one of our investors in our last round at Deployed came through as a institutional investor, but found me first through an angel group where he was wanting to invest in female founders. He saw me there, also invested as an angel and as an institutional investor, but he was proactively joining calls where female founders were pitching. So he was being exposed to more diversity. And actually he could see his pattern matching was starting to change because he was seeing that actually these female founders are building incredible businesses and, you know, the metrics and the traction that they've got is incredible. I want to back this business. I think one of the other biggest problems is actually designing the right questions. So Dana Kantz did a paper and a research article on female founders get asked prevention questions, whereas male founders get asked promotion questions. So they took these transcriptions of a Dragon's Den style pitch where basically they took all the questions asked to both male and female founders that were pitching on stage. And they noticed a pattern that all the female founders were asked, how are you going to prevent the loss of my money if I invest in you? So what are you doing to prevent customer churn? Like, what about if competitors come to the market? All these questions that immediately put anyone on a defense position because you're having to defend your startup and your position. Whereas the male founders were asked, how good could your customer retention be? And what other markets could you expand into? And what if you raise more money? So they were all like positive promotion questions. Now, if you're having a conversation like that, you know, that's going to feel like we're really vibing and, you know, we're talking about all of the upside and, you know, the potential of my startup. That's putting that individual and that founder in two very different psychological positions, right? So what I think we need to do is educate investors on what type of questions are you asking? Do you understand if you're asking a prevention and a promotion question? Are you enabling the founder to answer a question, or are you constraining them and putting them in a defensive position? I'm not saying that you should ask one over the other. I think that everyone should be asked a balanced set of those questions. But if you don't understand what type of question you're asking, then you can't design the question to be better. So I think if you started with what type of answer do I want from this founder? Like, what do I want to know? And then you design your question in the right way. The minute that you're having a conversation with someone, and if you're designing your questions that are helping that conversation free flow and creating psychological safety in that founder, then actually we're going to have a more honest, transparent conversation around the business. And that's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and especially because if you actually not just go on a particular route and you diversify your questions, it's much more easier to actually have a better picture about that startup. And still, if a founder is found in that situation and investors throw at them the defensive questions and the prevention questions, if you want to turn this into even more practical, this is actually really practical, but for the founders themselves now, if they found themselves in that situation, how they can better prepare in order not to feel empowered rather than, oh my God, I need to defend myself right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is totally ways around this. So when I was pitching for the last rounds, I noticed this was coming up a lot. I tracked everything. I tracked every question I was ever asked. I had AI transcribers on most of the calls, and I would listen back to how I answered those questions. Then what I did is I collated all of the questions into sections. And realistically, when you think about it, there's only really 10 categories that investors will ask you. You know, problem, solution, go-to-market, team, charging model, market size. So there's about 10 categories. And you could work with AI on this now, but basically what I did is build a blueprint for founders where I was like, okay, let's look at all the questions that investors could ask in that category. And they might be slightly nuanced, but then they're not going to be an infinite amount of questions. There's a limited amount of questions on each category. And then I will work with the founders to go, okay, what is the best response to that question? Let's try again. Let's write that down. So then we would build an FAQ. And every time I say to founders, every week you sit down, and whether you're recording yourself or you're working with your co-founder, you're like, ask me that question. And then you respond. And actually the best pitching that I've ever done is when I've been the most prepared. It's when I've been asked all those questions. It's when I know the answer. I know my business inside out. And knowing that and knowing my responses naturally builds confidence. And I think that's the way of getting around it, because not only am I signaling to that investor that I know my business inside out, you could challenge me on anything. And even if I haven't started implementing the answer, I know what I'm going to try first to solve that problem, even if I haven't done it already. That shows that I know where my strengths and weaknesses are, where my gaps are, where I'm going to put my effort, what I'm going to try. It also shows that I'm thinking outside the box and that I'm on it, right? There's no stone unturned to take this business to the next level. And that builds conviction and confidence in investors as well, and in the founder. So that's what I tell female founders to do. I'm like, write those questions down. And I think this is a real USP, and something I talk about a lot on LinkedIn. There is so many places that teach us how to pitch, which is great. I think we need that. First-time founders need to know how to pitch. But no one really teaches us how to engage in that Q&A session, that first 30 minutes when you've got access to an investor. It's a high-stakes conversation. There's a power dynamic asymmetry because you're asking for money and they're deciding where they give the money. Everything about that is so stress-inducing that if you're turning up to that pitch without practicing the Q&A part, which is really where you start to engage with someone, you know, just turning up and doing a 10-minute like, hi, here's my slides, I'm delivering a perfect pitch, I'm hitting all the notes. That's great. But the real conversation happens when you get into that Q&A. And that's where the power is for founders. And that's a real gap. And that's what I educate founders on all the time. You practice that, you know it inside out, and no question will throw you off. You can tell I'm really passionate about this.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And what I also wanted to say is that I hope a lot of female founders are watching or listening to us right now, and they resonate a lot, because I'm sure they are in those situations. They truly don't know how to prepare themselves for that Q&A session. And not only that, but they might face other struggles and so on. And I'd love you to tell them where they can reach out to you in order to get that extra push, that the help that most of us needs in order to succeed and in order to break through the barriers that we have there.
Yeah, and we all do need that help, right, to get us started. So I post prolifically about this on LinkedIn as well, and I'm always really active in my DMs. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I post about bias a lot. I post about framing questions. I try and share all of my knowledge openly as well. So that's definitely the best place to get me. And I just want to give one small tip. So if you ever come across that question when you don't know the answer as well, having a statement line where it's like, that is a really great question. I've thought about that. But to go into the answer now, I think it wouldn't do it justice. So what I would love to ask is permission to follow up with either an email or a full deep dive into how we plan on solving this problem. And I'm really glad you pointed it out. But in the time that we have today in our first meeting, I don't think I could give that question a really justified answer. So you're taking a placeholder that either buys you time to come back to a really challenging question. And also, if you have a question that you haven't thought about, that's great because you've got another one for your FAQs. And it's also giving you a hook to re-engage with that investor again. So that's my biggest trick. That's my biggest tip to any female founder. If you get those questions, have that sort of statement ready to go.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And speaking of sharing, you just walked the streets and you met young Emma. She just told her parents that she wants to stop going to school. But the problem is that you just have 1 minute with her. What would you tell her?
Keep going, dream big. And whenever anyone tells you you can't do it, just run towards that thing.
That's powerful because often it's all it takes, right? Like if you dream big enough and you don't stop and you don't listen to naysayers and believe so much in yourself, you're unstoppable. Thank you so much, Emma, for sharing that and for sharing all your insights that I truly believe those listening can apply for real in their founder career and start building those amazing solutions that we all need. Because often founders are underrated. They have this power to solve real life problems through their creativity, through their determination, through their grit, and as you said, resilience. And we need that. We need more founders. We need more amazing solutions because we all face different challenges. And yeah, thanks to people like you, we have the guidance as well for them to succeed. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Gabe.